Let's kindly reconvene and please take your seats. Colleagues in the corridor, Pat, please ask colleagues to join inside. Okay, so welcome back. We are now into the substantive sessions. We'll start with the setting the scene. But I've seen since the start of the day, it's a bit low of energy. So I will just manu military hijack someone and call someone on stage. And he knows. Eric Angala, please come on stage. Please come quick. This room needs some energizer. Come quick. For those who are sleeping at the back, please wake them up.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Did you have some Ethiopian coffee? If you did, please stand up. If you did, please stand up. Again, if you didn't, please stand up. So there are only two options, standing up and standing up. Aha. We need everyone to stand up a little bit. I know we fear exercise. I know we fear eating, but if you eat, you need to exercise, right? If you can see me, lift your left hand. Your left hand is the other hand. Okay? William, is that your left hand? Ambassador William. Okay. If you have ribs on this side, we want to stretch that rib. Okay? So we go tilting to your left. A little, just a little bit. Aha. Very attentive. So there was coffee in that. At least you took coffee. Tilt your right, just slightly. Please make sure you don't cause a medical emergency. Just a little bit, a little bit. Aha, come back. Your right hand is your left, the other left. We tilt towards left. Right? Macmin, are we doing it? All right. And then, ladies and gentlemen, I hand you back to Dr. Raj.
Okay, thanks, Eric. But I've seen Hazel and Shimona. You have not been standing, so you will exercise later on. Don't worry. And from here I can see everyone. So yeah, and there's also, my boss has just told me tomorrow we'll reduce the food for lunch and also for the tea breaks, coffee breaks, because you take too much time to eat. So we'll reduce the food so that we start on time. We're already running late by 30 minutes, so let me now invite our colleagues on stage for this session. So we have, this is setting the scene, and let me first and foremost invite the moderator for the session. He is PO Emeritus Richard Sewachir Yanga. Me, I can pronounce his name very well, but others mess his name. So that's why it's me who is inviting him on stage to join us to moderate this session. And we'll have the 5 pillars. You have the concept note. We have 5 thematic pillars for this Citizens Forum. We had many requests, but we prioritized 5 sessions, 5 thematics. So for the first thematic is Reimagining Global Governance and the UN Security Council. This will be, the thematic lead is Mr. Briggs Bomba. He has already arrived in Addis Ababa. He should be joining us in the next hour or so. Don't worry, Richard, he will be joining us in a few. The second thematic we have is Reimagining the Global Financial Architecture. And for that one, we have Ruth Kendago, Director, Global Partnership Institute of the Public Finance Kenya. So please join us, Ruth, on stage. You can join or you can wait all the others to come on stage with PO. Then the next thematic we have is Climate Action and Just Energy Transition. And we invite Dr. Anika Altaf, Executive Director, Include Platform. She was the one asking me, are you going to moderate this session? I told Dr. Anika, no. Me, whenever I see the mic is open, I just step in on stage and just talk. So moderation will be by Richard Sewachir Yanga, don't worry. The next thematic is AI governance, digital sovereignty, and Africa's digital public infrastructure. So we invite Dangan Abra to join us. And lastly, we have the thematic on justice for Africans and people of African descent. So for this, we have Mr. Chiritwe Osei, the head of programs for ECOSOC. So with your claps and accompanied by P.O. Richard Sewache Yanga, welcome them on stage, but I will kindly request P.O. at least do us a favor to manage time because we are already running late on time. Before I hand the floor and the mic to Richard, I'll kindly recognize my sister Kim Paul. I say, Kim Paul, I want everyone to clap for you. You know, there is no ECOSOC event, be it in Accra, be it in Lusaka, be it in New York, where Kim does not come attend ECOSOC events. And that is at her own cost. It's not like we are paying for her to come. So this shows the commitment, the determination. And to all our colleagues from the diaspora who have traveled all the way, from the Americas or from all across the world, you are here. So we really value your presence here. We don't take it for granted. Definitely later on, Mr. Osei and Mr. Keru, Ambassador Keru will talk more about our diaspora engagement, but really, we really appreciate your commitment. So with these few words, Pio, I hand back the floor to you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Raj, thank you very much. They said we say all protocol observed. It has become an African way to recognize protocol. So what we are going to do is to start the session by making sure that we sit close to each other. Because there are two seats which are empty, and I would love that you go to the next seat and she comes to the next seat. Yes, right there. Okay. I know those little papers can be a problem, especially if you can't find your name, but hopefully we will. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this first session. My name is not ECOSOC Secretariat, as it is on the program. My name is Richard Sewachirianga. William completely failed, Ambassador William. I have to apologize. I knew him before he became an ambassador, so I always call him William, but he completely failed to pronounce my name. But I told him that my name, Sewachirianga, is actually an abbreviation of the full name. The full name is much longer. It is a full story in my village. But having said all that, we want to start the session. All of you, welcome to this year's Citizens Forum. I think the Citizens Forum is always an exciting time, as you will find out, because of the diversity of knowledge that we gather from here. And so I have been told that I have to manage time. Raj, that means that we use half an hour or 1 hour, 45 minutes. You have to give me one of those three options. Okay. He smiled to all of them, so let me see how far we can go. What we are going to do, this session is called Conversation with the Thematic Co-Chairs. So the people you see here are going to be convening us, I think, most of tomorrow, maybe and part of this afternoon, to speak about the topics that you see next to their names. So what I'll be doing is to just have a conversation with them. I'm not going to ask them to make presentations. When they start presenting, I will interrupt so that we have a conversation. Just so that, take this as, how do they call that, when you are marketing your product? I've seen these days on TikTok, people sell things and they do a very good job to market it in less than a minute. So we are going to try and see if we can adopt some of that. That's what my kids tell me, and they have taught me how to look at those little things. Although I was also told that those small TikTok videos are also addictive. So let's not try and be addictive, but we shall try and capture the attention so that tomorrow many people can come to your sessions. I think the opening ceremony was good in terms of how people set out this whole question of reimagining governance and global governance and how Africa is. We talk about the world in transition. But probably that's something that is true today, but has been true for a long time. This whole question of a world in transition, it looks like the world is always in transition anyway. So I think what we just have to do is to rethink. When we say reimagine, that also includes rethinking what this global governance looks like. For Africa, our experiences don't end. We have always, I think, lived in the reality of transitions, right from the colonial, the post-colonial, the different things that we have to contend with, I think are critical. And so for now, we have these 5 topics. BRICS would have been here and helped us to talk to reimagining global governance and the UN Security Council reform. He is not here to do that, but we shall see if we shall find somebody else to say 1 or 2 things about that. But the next one is reimagining the global financial architecture, and Ruth is here to talk about that. Financial architecture is one of the things we really need to reimagine. Why? Because it is influencing what kinds of developments we see in Africa and all. But that's for Ruth to give us a quick sense. So that's the next one. Then we shall talk about climate action and a just energy transition. And Anika will be speaking to that. And then we will talk about AI governance, digital sovereignty, and Africa's digital public infrastructure. Those are big words, each one of them. Digital sovereignty is always something I wonder, what does that mean? But we have an expert to help us to deal with that. And then we'll talk about justice for Africans and African people. And Nana from ECOSOC will speak about that because he's been connected and focusing on it a lot. So, Ruth, let's start with you. Global financial architecture. First of all, they said there are many young people at the back. To the young people at the back who may not have experienced finances as much as the old people at the front, how would you describe this whole thematic, and what is it that we are trying to address and achieve in this session?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think we're already seeing a transition in the room. You can see a clear divide. The first half of the room, I'm not saying you're old, but I'm saying you have lived more years compared to the generation behind you. And I don't know if it is by design that is already symbolizing a transition that is coming, that in the years to come, the team sitting on the second half will be sitting on this side of the room, and there'll be another team sitting on that side. And that is what informs the discussions that we want to have today and tomorrow. What decisions are we making as a continent that affects our lives today, affects their lives today and tomorrow, and the generations that will sit on that side of the room in the next few years? When we talk about the global financial architecture, basically we are looking at the rules, the practices, the norms, and the institutions that determine how financing decisions are made. How is voting done? Who has the say? Who decides how much money Africa gets to receive? Who decides what kind of a loan or what borrowing is Africa capable of? Who decides the risk premium for Africa? Who said that Africa is a risky continent? How is that risk defined and measured? Those are some of the components when we talk about the global financial architecture. The current system as it is was developed over almost 80 years ago, almost 100 years now. Between then and now, things have changed a lot in terms of the economies of the world, the different countries, the resources available, the demographic dividend, the development patterns have changed, but the financing systems, those rules, those practices have not changed accordingly. And so what countries today are calling for, what Africa is calling for, that these practices should be reviewed and changed to be able to meet the demands for the current generation. And one thing I think we need to applaud our continent is that over the last couple of years, we have transitioned from being very vocal and shouting that we want change to actually looking inwards and saying, as Africa, we want to drive our own change. And what we are doing towards driving this African-led change is creating our own institutions and our own systems that will influence how our development is financed. If you look at the recent developments, talk about the interventions or initiatives led by African Union Commission, talk about the Common Africa position that defines and explains our position as Africa in terms of how we want to manage our debts today and into the future. Look at initiatives such as the Africa Debt Monitoring Mechanism and how it is evolving, if well developed and adapted, becomes a mechanism for us to be able to monitor, to share information, and even have early warning signs. Early warning was something that was not discussed several years back then when the systems was being put in place. Look at the initiatives by the Africa Development Bank, the NAFAD, the new financing architecture. Look at initiatives like the multilateral financing institutions that are forming alliances to facilitate and finance trade in Africa. These are coming up as African-owned, Africa-led, and Africa-steered institutions. And what I hope is that as we continue with these conversations today and tomorrow, then we'll be able to ask ourselves as African citizens, what do we want these African-led institutions to deliver for us? As we reflect internally about our African institutions and show our strength and leadership in this, then we're able to amplify and say, then this is what we want the global architecture to also deliver for Africa. The other day I sat in a forum, allow me to just say this. I sat in a forum that was discussing the UN reforms.
A small follow-up question as before you go to your forum. So will you be also spending time helping us to understand what an African citizen or citizen organizations can participate? Because the thing about financial architectures is they are state-driven. And sometimes what the state does is to take away our money and buy very good cars for their politicians. These are going to be things that you are going to sort of say, this is what a local citizen can do as part of engaging with the question of the global financial architecture. Just as you go on.
Yes, indeed. So the session tomorrow, the panel tomorrow, actually speak to what you've just said. We will help deepen the understanding of the current reforms and then bring in perspectives that says, what does inclusion look like? Beyond the big word that we read and write in our reports, what does it really look like for the day-to-day life of my life as a citizen, your life as a citizen? What does inclusion look like from a religious perspective? How are we bringing in these unique traits of our African continent and the strong religious beliefs we have to shape our governance processes? What does transparency, what kind of transparency do we need? So that as we say we want to be included, for us to have meaningful inclusion, then we need good transparency, deep transparency that enables us to understand and participate. And most importantly, once we are included, we understand and participate, what does accountability look like? How are we able to say, this is working well, please proceed, amplify. This is not working well, we need corrective actions coming from the citizens. This is not working. We need to change. How do we drive citizen-centered accountability that is both catalytic, influential for corrective action, as well as for learning and continuous development? Those are some of the things that will speak up in the forum.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, give her a good clap. And clapping has two functions. One is to appreciate her. The other one is to exercise your hands. So I hope that the next time I say give her a good clap, you will have to use more energy. Okay? But thank you very much, because what you've helped us to see is, a really interesting session. Financing is one of those things that are always talked about by intimidating people. People from banks, they fly around, sophisticate themselves, and make us look like we don't know anything about financing. So it's good that you are going to even talk about inclusion and what all those things look like. Right now, I think we are in such an interesting crisis. I always wonder how many people have a Google account here, Gmail. And many of us keep being charged $1 or $2 by somebody whom we don't know. But they keep taking our money every month. And I keep saying, this guy must be very rich if he charges us for all these little things. So, global financial architecture, I think, should help us to deal with that. So thank you very much. And you can see that will be an interesting session, especially as we go into it tomorrow. So we would like to move on to the next speaker. And the next speaker is going to give us a quick highlight around the whole question of climate action and a just energy transition. Now, the thing about climate is that, again, like finance, it is one of those things that you have to experience. It is very unapologetic. When I see the floods in my country, they don't care who you are. Other things may care, but these are not discriminate. They actually are very inclusive. Climate disasters are very inclusive. I hope that that's the language. But you have used the word climate action, and you have used just energy transition. And as I said before, those are two big words. So you will help us to simplify them, especially for, now it will be the older people. The younger people may know this a bit more, especially for the older people in the room like myself. What does that mean to actually have what we call, climate action? Are there things we can do now when we have a room that is sealed off like this in air condition? Are we doing the right thing or the wrong thing? When we, but tell us how the session will really help us to understand this question more. And as I put her to her, help us to also know how citizens and their organizations can actually play a role. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So indeed, the session is about climate change, climate justice, and the just energy transition. Very, very big words. And they entail a lot. And I'm going to try to narrow it down to one specific initiative, because I think we shouldn't just be talking about these topics, but we should also try to do something actionable. And I want to focus specifically on that just and the justice part of it. And I know probably people immediately think about the fact that Africa is bearing the biggest weight compared to other regions when it comes to the impact of climate and climate change. We all know that. But what I want to focus on today is Africa's position in the global negotiations about the brunt that the continent is bearing. And so specifically in bigger spaces such as a COP, the climate top, if we look at the African climate negotiators that walk into COP, there are a couple of things that we've identified basically. That they are the ones with the least real-time information, with the least coordinated support, and the least technical backup if you compare them with other blocs at the table. And this is one of the main reasons why Africa walks out of COPs with disappointing headlines. And you see that African climate negotiators are outgunned when it comes to data and coordination, even before the talks begin. So what we're currently doing is developing and building a situation room for Africa at COP31 this year in November. And the idea behind this situation room is that there will be live intelligence and coordination that gives negotiators and ministers the data, the analysis, but also a real-time dashboard that they can use to negotiate from a position of strength, a position of information, and also coherence, because we often see that countries individually are negotiating for their own benefits, but at the end of the day, that doesn't add up. There needs to be much more coherence in order to form a bloc and to be stronger. How this is going to work exactly, we're going to delve into that this afternoon in the session that's moderated by Victoria Manya. And I would like to invite all of you to join this session, not only to listen to this, but really to participate, and especially as civil society organizations, you are on the ground. You have all the information and the data of people that are experiencing this day to day. And it's really, really important that we get that also on that sort of technocrat level. And please, don't think of data information as just scientific knowledge. Knowledge from people is real important knowledge that we need to take into account and need to take with us at the negotiation table. I think I will end for there. I think that's, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No, but I can't allow you to end there, because I have one small thing to say about what you've just said. I come from a research center. It's called the Center for Basic Research in Uganda. And one of the things from what you said is around the kind of data that our negotiators need. And I know that what is always done is to ensure that the data, production of knowledge, as you know, is political. So even the data we mine, if we mine it from the wrong places, it can be an issue. So are there things you'll be talking about around how to actually collect the data that can strengthen the African position and story? And therefore, meaning collecting the data, either that's relevant or is in the right places. Is that something that we shall be hearing about?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. So do come.
So now that my point has been made, that we shall have a much larger discussion, because for me, I think for Africa, data and where it comes from is one of our biggest challenges. And the good thing is the speakers there are people who I know are also very energetic. Our own colleague Vinesh, the chair of infrastructure, at least when you speak to him in the corner, he always has a spirited way of making his case. So we are going to kindly ask that you do the same in this session. So thank you very much. So that's the session on climate action and just energy, just energy transition. Yes. Please learn this language. It's a new language for some of you and me, but it's very helpful for us to see where the world is going. So we now want to move on to the next one on AI governance, digital sovereignty, and Africa's digital public infrastructure. Wow. The good thing is these days they tell us anything we don't know, we ask ChatGPT. So hopefully I can ask ChatGPT, what is ChatGPT? Does it answer those kinds of questions? We will find out. But before we go into, but seriously, I think you are going to be helping us in something that has arrived in our compound unannounced, sometimes very aggressively, and yet this new digital governance and infrastructure, we can't run away from it. It looks like we are cornered. So are you going to be talking about how to uncorner those of us who feel cornered by AI, by digital security, by many other things? How are you going to approach this discussion? But before you even tell us how you're going to approach, help us to see if you can, when you talk about those three big words, the AI governance, the digital sovereignty, and what you called the digital public infrastructure. What is all that?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So we know that in recent times, as you have rightly said, there's been a lot of talk about AI, and because AI has an impact on how we engage, how we relate with one another, it has increasingly become ingrained in everyday life. A lot of stakeholders are considering AI as something that might also border on sovereignty. In fact, I was having a conversation with someone earlier today when we're talking about the use of AI and platforms and how it can change the perspectives of young children who grow up into adults and form the next generation of the Africa that we have today. And this is very salient and important. Again, we have to consider that the conversations around technology is increasingly becoming some sort of geographical contention issue. We've seen the cases of some countries using technology, especially or including AI, to wield their soft power. So all of these conversations are currently happening in real time. Where does Africa stand in all of this? Now, against this backdrop, we know that when we talk about global governance right now, there are several things that come to mind. But then, who governs AI? And on whose terms, right? And this is a conversation that Africa also needs to be involved with, because we find that a lot of the technology that we use, especially Africa's situation within the AI ecosystem, is imported. How much of the technology really comes from Africa? And so because of that, there is also the question of where is Africa's agency in AI development as well. So all of these questions really fall under what we're talking about when we talk about AI governance. Who governs AI? Where is Africa situated in all of this, especially considering the fact that we do not have the infrastructure per se. We use technology that have been handed to us. So that's one key aspect of what we're going to be unbundling in the session tomorrow. Another aspect that we're going to be looking at is digital sovereignty, which really relates with the power to control your destiny, especially as it relates with data, as it relates with infrastructure, which also connects to what I said earlier about how we do not really have access to we have access to the technology, but it's really handed to us, So in a nutshell, it's not really about closing Africa out of the world, right? It's about African countries having the regulatory capacity, data governance framework, the digital and public infrastructure to be able to thrive in a digital world as we have today. And we know that African countries are increasingly interested in this aspect. In fact, there are over 20 AI strategies, AI policies, and several also under consideration. But then we have these African countries aligning all of these agencies to suit their own internal national agendas. But then we have a continent as well that needs to have one voice, when it comes to conversations that are global relating to AI. So how do we situate ourselves in all of this? What needs to be done? That's also one core issue that will be highlighted in the session tomorrow. Then we go to the issue of digital public infrastructure, which relates with having stack that can give access to public services. We have key components like data, for example, payment infrastructure, data exchange, and all of that. But again, even though a lot of stakeholders say that this DPI can leapfrog Africa to enable access to health, for example, and public service delivery. When it comes to data, for example, the infrastructure for storing data in the cloud, is it even ours in the first place? So all of these are core issues that need to be considered, and we'll be hoping to have you in our session tomorrow, where the core experts on the panel will be breaking all of this down and unbundling these key issues.
That seems it's going to be a very exciting session. I don't know about you, but maybe you've talked about, when you talked about AI governance, I remember the story I had yesterday of an AI attacking an AI. And I said, okay, if our AIs are starting to attack each other, where does that leave us, the people who are supposed to use them? So hopefully, again, you can help us to see if Africa is not going to become the battleground for all these AI attacks and leakages and things because of our absence of the regulatory capacity. But also something came to my mind when I thought, they told us most of the wars that are being fought now are really employing, AI technologies and all these things. They told us which war, is it the Iran war, where there has been no foot soldier, but there have been hundreds of drones and many things. So hopefully you are going to help us with that. And when you talk about infrastructure, then I'm thinking also about, some of the emancipatory roles that AI has played for Africa, even without infrastructure. I remember when the mobile phone was being introduced, it looked like, it's out there, it's very sophisticated. But today it's saving lives everywhere and many other things. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be an interesting session. So once again, is to let you know that please listen in. And for all of us, I think this is something we cannot run away from. So thank you very much, and we look forward to an interesting session that has been put together by Abra. So Nana, yours is also something that we have talked about a lot, that Africa has even gone ahead to talk about people of African descent and African justice. Now, it's interesting because right now, as I was flying in here, I am reading a book called African Thought Leadership by Stephen Chan. And he goes into all these stories from Marcus Garvey to Cabral to all these huge, actually even Mobutu, Kaunda, and their roles. And he talks about how, they sort of have been engaging with this question of justice for Africans from the first place. I remember this morning, actually, I was reading a section on Frantz Fanon and how he sat in Kinshasa. Those days, what was called Leopoldville in the 1960s. And how, again, because Lumumba was asking for justice for African people when he said that the people who are here for colonialism are here because they love our minerals, they don't love us. And because of that, he lost his life. But now, the justice you are talking about, does it collect all that historical knowledge that sometimes I feel is getting forgotten in this new discussion around justice for people of African descent? And one point even to make is that I know that many people don't know that even this whole question of Pan-Africanism didn't start on the African continent. It was people in the Americas and others, Marcus Garvey and others, who were actually talking about Pan-Africanism, and for your own country, where they were talking about a return to the to our original land. But let me not display too much of ignorance by saying all these things. What are you going to talk about in this session?
Thank you very much. I think when it comes to reparations, conversations around Africans and people of African descent, Pan-Africanism, I think sometimes we tend to go straight to a certain place, especially for the younger people like me, representing my colleagues in the back, where it's as though you have to be from a certain disposition, a certain level of sort of like almost like a militant, like really out there speaking about Pan-Africanism and things like this. But I would like to maybe broaden the perspective a little bit. When you look at the presentations we've heard, we have one from on the international financial architecture. We've had climate change, AI. And yes, those are specific topics, but I think when you listen to the cluster leads, what is the one principle behind all of that? I would suggest it's one of power relationships. So you're not really talking about just the international, the IMF and the World Bank and climate change and all of these. I think when you drill down, it's about who has the power to determine what gets done, who is in the room, why are certain people in the room and others not, and most importantly, what are the systems and structures that lock in the different stakeholders, right? So I think that's the wider conversation that we want to have when it comes to reparations. It's not something that a bunch of radical ideologues, are saying, oh, you need to pay money to people of African descent, and all of these different things. That's not what the conversation is. And I think it's really important that we have, especially young people in the room, so that we can try to have a discussion about exactly what it is that the African Union wants to achieve with this conversation. We are trying to reimagine a new global order, so at different levels. And I think one of the things I would like to see is a new global order that is just and fair, right? And that allows peoples and societies to achieve their full potential. But part of that is recognizing the role of historical events that has allowed, if you imagine a race, let's say we have a race of countries, right? You have people out in front, people way out in the back. And so you have a conversation around, well, what was the starting line where people given advantage structurally or disadvantaged structurally? So to have a conversation around the historical injustices that different regions and societies have endured at the hands of others, and what are the continuing consequences? And that is where I really want us to have this clarity, because a lot of